have a duty to help keep kids safe and parents informed or face serious consequences. Most social media platforms already claim not to allow kids under the age of 13 onto their platforms, but often rely on self-reporting methods that can be easily circumvented by kids. As a result, 38% of kids ages 8 to 12 say that they already use social media. There are even fewer safeguards for teenagers who report spending nearly 9 hours every day looking at screens. Yet more than 60% report trying but failing to quit social media. Signs of dependency and addiction. This is not an accident. Social media platforms use powerful algorithms to addict young users and to keep them scrolling for as long as possible. The rise of smartphones and social media has also coincided with an unprecedented mental health crisis for America's kids. And of course, child safety is another concern as well. Federal law enforcement estimates that there are 500,000 predators online every day, and 50% of their victims are between the ages of 12 and 15. This danger haunts countless parents and keeps them up at night. Our bill is a common sense approach. If a child is, say, too young to sign a contract or too young to open a bank account, in the real world, they're too young to sign terms of service agreement and use social media in the digital world. They're too young to see a rated R movie. They're too young to be exposed to much of the content that is on social media and manipulating what they think, what they feel about themselves and others. So I look forward to working with my partners on this bill, and Republicans and Democrats alike, to see it enacted into law so we can protect our kids. And I'll turn it over to Senator Murphy.
Thank you very much, Tom. I want to thank Brian and Tom and Katie for this partnership. As a politician and as a parent, I have seen the tremendous benefits that social media delivers to Americans of all ages. It allows us to better connect with the people that we serve. I've seen the smiles on my two children's faces when they're watching something that delights them online. I've seen the way that it can help connect them to their peers. But I have also seen the immense damage that it does to our kids in a very personal way. I've watched with this combination of wonder and worry and anxiety as I've seen both my children be subjected to these algorithms that are intent on addicting them to their screens and pulling them away from much more fulfilling and meaningful connection to their family and to their peers. Chase Naska committed suicide last year at age 16. And in the aftermath of that suicide, his parents got access to his phone and were able to see the content that one of these social media companies was delivering to their young son, whose brain at age 16 was still developing. He was getting relentless content about depression, hopelessness, and death. Some of the last videos he likely saw before he stepped in front of a moving train told him, "Take the pain away. Death is a gift." One young man said on his feed, "I'm going to put a shotgun in my mouth and blow my brains out," and a female voice pipes in and says, "Cool." The social media companies have had plenty of opportunity to do the right thing and to make sure that the content they are delivering to our kids is healthy. They have failed to deliver. I don't think it's a coincidence that the four of us are all raising young children today, because parents want and deserve tools to help keep their kids safe online. Today, they simply don't have those tools. This bill fixes that. This bill gives parents the ability to decide with their children when is the right time to step into this world. And by reserving these algorithms for individuals whose brains are ready to receive and deal with that content, we're also taking a really important step to protect the health of our kids online. So I'm really excited to be working on this bill with this group. I think it's really important that parents in the Congress step up and tell the story of what's happening to our families and lead the conversation about how we change our laws to protect our kids and give these new tools to parents. With that, let me turn it over to Senator Britt.
Thank you. It is an honor to be standing here. I want to thank these gentlemen for your leadership, Senator Schatz, Senator Cotton, Senator Murphy. Truly appreciate you stepping up and answering the call. I stand here today, just like these men, not as a Democrat or Republican, not as someone who sits on the right side of the aisle or the left, but as a concerned parent. As a mom who is raising a 13 and a 14-year-old right now, I see the effects of this every single day. When I talk to my friends and talk about what they're dealing with their children, the realities and the negative effects that social media can bring into one's life and into one's home, particularly as they learn to grow, as they're trying to learn their way, have become very real. I've traveled the state of Alabama, and unfortunately I've heard the same thing from parents in every corner of our state. I have sat across from a father who showed me the last picture of his beautiful daughter who died by suicide the next day. Y'all, enough is enough. The data speaks for itself. Over 50%, or just around that, of high school students have said that they are actually addicted in one way or another to social media. We look at the numbers referenced by Senator Schatz between the years of 2011 and 2019, depression among our children has doubled. And in our high school, females, 1 in 3 have said that they have considered suicide. As someone who was a high school young woman at one point in her life, I can tell you how challenging that time is for anyone. But that was 25 years ago. If you add in the complications and the additional stressors and pressure of social media, it becomes too much for some to bear. This bill steps up and does what we need it to. It allows parents to be back a part of the conversation, and it also makes sure that big tech cannot prey on the emotions of our children. I am proud to be a part of this as we see this problem continues to grow. The time to act is now. We must protect our children so that we can protect their future and ultimately make sure that they have the opportunity to live the American dream. Thank you.
We'll now take some questions. Yes.
We just spoke with Senator Blumenthal about this bill, and as you know, he's doing a lot of work on this with his own bill. But one thing he expressed serious concerns about was age verification, and I wonder what your response is to that, being that you want to have rigorous age verification in your bill.
Well, first of all, I think I speak for the group when I say that the Kids Online Safety Act, we believe, is compatible with this legislation, and that there's lots of momentum in the Senate and the House on the Democratic and the Republican side of the aisle to do a suite of things on behalf of kids' online safety. So I'm not going to get into sort of any public policy disputes right now, except to say that one of the foundations of this bill is age verification, and we do not believe the current age verification regime is actually working. But if you are one of those people who does not think that a parent should be involved in the decision to get a kid on social media at the age of 13, we just have a fundamental disagreement, and that is one of the foundations of this bill. We want to empower parents, and we think parents agree with us. Yes. Yeah, sure.
Actually, I want to follow up, speak on the age verification question. Look, age verification online is done every day. It's not hard, it's not complicated. There are third-party companies that do this for government agencies at the local, state, and federal level. You're talking about only one data point, a person's birthday. For 13 to 17-year-olds, adding the parental relationship. Companies like ID.me are used by the Social Security Administration or the VA, or they're used by states as politically diverse as Wyoming and California for things like gambling or lottery or other kinds of online activity. We do age verification routinely. So it's simply not a serious argument that we cannot do online age verification for social media companies, just like we do in so many other settings in the digital world.
Yeah, and I just wanted to follow up on that to see if you could walk us through a little bit more how you intend to require these social media companies to enact this, more rigorous age verification standards, and also how to prevent them from using some of these algorithms. And do you have any buy-in from some of these social media companies?
On the first, it's a rather technical sort of legal question, so let me get you the details on how the age verification standard works. But we just made sure to raise the standard. We're not prescriptive on how they mechanically do the age verification. And on the second, I'm sorry, what was the second question?
Why? Yeah, just how you would.
Oh, we have not, we have not shopped this with social media companies for understandable reasons, but we're looking forward to the dialogue.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
Just again, on the age verification point. First off, remember, there's two classes of youth here. Under 13. Social media companies already claim that they don't allow people under 13 on their platforms. So they've already conceded the point. Now we're just haggling over the details. And I would submit if social media companies argue that you cannot verify their age, they're simply trying to kill the bill because they want to monetize minors' eyeballs for their profits. And second, as Senator Schatz said, the bill is not prescriptive. It requires these companies to take reasonable steps. They could develop their own system and argue that that's a reasonable step. They could use third-party contractors that are already used by other government agencies. It allows the Department of Commerce to create a pilot program that can be used as well. It simply imposes a burden of reasonableness on these companies, which is widespread across the law, and says that if you don't follow reasonable steps, given the state of technology today, you can be held accountable by the Federal Trade Commission or by state attorneys general for inflicting these harms on minors.
This might be a question just for Senators Cotton and Senator Britt. Are you hearing any concerns from fellow Republicans that this might be an overregulation, that is actually the job of parents on their own to keep their children off of social media?
So I think that's exactly what parents want. They want to be back in the game. They want to have the ability to make sure that they can have tough conversations with their children. We all know, obviously, the benefits that can come from social media. We want our children to be able to connect and to explore. But we also want to make sure that that's done within the proper, where we put up the proper guardrails. Parents being able to figure out when children are ready for that is a critical step in that. And then also knowing that they have that ability to actually explore. When you look at what algorithms do, they continue to push you to certain content. This is going to allow kids, as I was talking earlier, back in the day, and it's maybe too old for some of you young ones in the front row, but you would go into a library, you have the Dewey Decimal System, you'd go to the card catalog, you'd be able to search and find where you wanted to go, exploring the entire room. What algorithms do is they basically send you back to the same part of the library over and over and over again. We want our children to be able to actually see what's out there. And then I think children being able to have that conversation with parents and putting parents back in the driver's seat with regards to when their children are allowed to get on social media is critically important. We see it harming kids across this country, and we finally have to stand up to big tech and put people over their profits.
I would say I've heard the opposite. I've heard from a lot of our Kansans who are excited about the prospect of being able to once again control what their kids are seeing online in the digital world, just like they would in the real world. For those who have kids under the age of 13, there's an actual and an effective age verification system to make sure that your child is not using a social media site without your knowledge. For ages 13 to 17, parental approval that doesn't currently exist. And I just want to stress again, this is simply applying the age-old wisdom of mankind from the real world to the digital world. We don't let minors sign contracts. We don't let them open bank accounts. We don't let them enlist in the military. We don't let them drink alcohol or smoke tobacco without parental consent. If those standards exist in the real world as they have for the ages, why would we allow them to do those things or something like those things in the digital world?
Just quickly add, I find that this is one of the most apolitical conversations I have in Connecticut. I see very little, if any, disagreement between my constituents on the right and on the left when it comes to the agony that parents are going through today as they try to figure out what their kids are seeing and what their kids are being addicted to online. And frankly, if you look at some of the states that are moving forward with the most aggressive bills protecting kids online, they're Republican states. They're states that have Republican governors and Republican state legislatures. I think Democratic states will follow. But to me, the opportunity here is to really frame this inside this building the same way that it exists out there in the public, as a conversation that has nothing to do with party and partisanship, that actually unites people of differing political views around one very simple premise, that parents should have better tools to protect their kids.
Senator, could you describe
Yeah,
what?
and then you-
Actually, my question is for Senator Britt, if that's okay. With no disrespect to my fellow dads, but as someone who's been working in this space, as a mom, how do you talk to your own kids about social media? How do you approach this issue?
Yeah, it's a real challenge. I mean, we think about all of us. I mean, think back to your high school years. Think back to junior high. Think back to middle school. Think about the things that people said to you or they said to somebody else about you. Imagine if those things were memorialized forever online. Imagine if your post or your picture or your like not only followed you the next day when you were young and still not mature enough to know the effects of that, but it follows you for a lifetime. We also look at what young men and young women are dealing with when we actually hear about these things. There's now, people who are getting on social media anonymously and posting negative things about other classmates or starting rumors. Y'all, we can't control all of this. So the reason we're up here as parents is we want to do something to help our children better navigate this, and something to help protect them from the harms that can come. And so when I talk to my kids, and then even when I'm driving carpool and I'm listening to all the different things, people say, did you see that post? Did you see what she was wearing? Did you see who they were with? You realize that all the things we dealt with, y'all, we are layering so many pressures on top of them. And I would just ask you, as adults, how many of you have struggled with what someone has posted on social media, or what someone has said, or what someone has done? And so we have to take a step back and as parents say, how can we protect our children, teach them how to use this tool, to use it for good, and to be intentional in doing that. So we constantly have these conversations in my house. As you can imagine, there's some spirited debate around them. And then also having them with their friends, letting them know that posts and that their comments and their words matter, and that those things have lasting effects. Also trying to teach them that unfortunately in this world, we have decided that if you don't agree with someone, you can't show them respect. I think that's completely and totally wrong. Trying to teach them that you don't say something behind a screen that you wouldn't be able to say right there to someone, and trying to kind of sort of reinstill those values in my kids. So it's tough. It really is. We are parenting in a new age. If you think about when we had an issue at school, back when all of us went to school, you've got to kind of leave that issue or that bullying or that problem at school. And if in fact you wanted to deal with it, you had to call someone's house and you had to say, Mrs. Johnson, this is Katie Boyd. Is Kim available? Nowadays they shoot it off right in the class. They take a picture from the classroom and then it goes viral. There's a lot of opportunity as parents that we would have been able to have that conversation within the home. What was that conversation about? Tell me what happened. Give them an opportunity and the tools to deal with that issue, with that conflict in a productive way. That's what we're trying to do here, is let parents be a part of, hey, this is what, before you get on social media, these are the challenges it'll present, and these are also the opportunities, and hopefully teach our children to make the right choices.
Thank you.
Could you just describe the consultation process that led up to this bill? Did you talk to any outside groups? Would you be able to name a few?
We were very, not quite secret, but private about it, because we understood the sensitivity of this issue. And we've seen, especially in the tech policy space, that that they have an army of lobbyists, that they have many former congressional staffers, that they have a lot of people online to poke holes, that they have lots of allies. And so we wanted to get our ducks in a row first. And part of the first question about a couple of months ago is, do we have a meeting of the minds here? Do we think there is a policy solution, at least partly, to what's going on online? And then we just, got our staffs together and had pretty regular conference calls and meetings to get there. We have been vetting this to the extent that it's appropriate. We know everybody's going to, every tech policy bill that gets proposed, there are think tanks and lobbyists and others who whisper in the ears and say, what about this and what about that? And we have no doubt that that'll occur on this bill. But this is a pretty straightforward proposition. Should an 11-year-old be allowed on a platform that feeds them content that gives them suicidal ideation? I think the answer to that is no. And should a kid between 13 and 17 have to consult with their parent to get online? I think the answer is yes. And should these, look, there's no free speech right to be jammed with an algorithm that makes you upset. And these algorithms are making us increasingly polarized and despairing and depressed and angry at each other. And it's bad enough that it's happening to all of us adults. The least we can do is protect our kids. How much time do we have? Yeah, okay. So yes, and then in the back, and then over there, and then I think that might be it.
Senator Basil Drummond, next star. To follow up on Senator Britt's point, where she was talking about cooperation with schools, how it was beforehand, does this legislation touch on anything with helping parents who do not know as much as when it comes to the risks of social media, and will there be cooperation with schools so parents can learn more to make more informed decisions on whether to allow their kids on social media?
This bill does not have an educational component. It's really regulatory in nature. It sets up new requirements for the social media companies and an enforcement mechanism. So to the extent that schools are going to have to kind of integrate this new law into their operations. And I just point out, this doesn't solve every problem in mental health for every kid, right? You know, you're still going to need more mental health services across the country. You're still going to need to address a number of problems. So this, I think, gets at a big chunk of the problem, but it's not designed to address the in-school problem.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
and it's a simplicity, too. I mean, you can read this bill. Everyone can go read it, and maybe 12 minutes. It's about, what, 8, 9 pages long.
Mike.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Hey, I'm new here. You know, there's a simplicity. I mean, everyone can go read this bill in probably around 10 minutes. It's about 8 or 9 pages long. Things that our constituents hate is when we have to vote on things that are thousands of pages long, that are hard to comprehend. We know this doesn't fix every single problem, but we know the cost of doing nothing is way too great. So a step in the right direction to make sure that we put parents back in the game, to allow them to have that conversation with their child about when they're ready for social media and the positives and negatives that may come from that, and then making sure that we don't allow big tech to profit off of their emotions. As they are learning and growing and trying to figure things out, we need to save that space for them and let them do that without interference.
Before I go to the next question, I just want to emphasize the following point, which is kids would still be permitted to get on social media. It would just be the social media that we remember about 10 years ago, where you could post a picture of your dog or your birthday cake or your grandma and share a little bit about what's happening in your life, and your friends would see that. Now that's, you know, not without its own set of issues which could impact kids, but it's the algorithm that predicts with great accuracy and with an incredible relentlessness how you will be engaged on the site. And sure, some kids, some users don't increase their engagement by being upset, but statistically speaking, that's the way to high profitability. You get high engagement by a high degree of polarization and upset. And so the business model is the more we upset kids, the more money we make, and that just has to stop. Yes?
Matt Laszlo, Wired Magazine. Bringing this up to one of your Democratic colleagues, they likened it to Tipper Gore taking on hip-hop music back in the 80s. What do you say to your Democratic colleagues who are skeptical of this?
I mean, is this an anonymous Democratic colleague?
Tina Smith.
I think, look, Tina's a very thoughtful person, and I'm going to talk to her about this. I think when we get a chance to talk about this, they will understand that this is, you know, this is not a heavy hand here. This is simply to empower parents to start to reverse this incredibly alarming trend of kids getting increasingly suicidal and despairing. Last question.
Let me just,
oh, yeah, sure.
Just add it. So, I mean, let's be clear. This bill is completely content neutral. Right? So this bill is short because it does not dictate to social media companies what kind of content they can put on their site and what kind of content they cannot. All it says is that you cannot build a purposefully addictive program that leads especially vulnerable children down deep, dark, dangerous rabbit holes. And so to Brian's point, listen, social media companies are still going to be able to make a lot of money under this proposal. Yes, it may be that for individuals aged 13 to 18, they are now going to have to select channels with relevant content. But there's nothing in this bill that tells companies what they can put on their sites and what they can't. It just gives parents a better ability to have a conversation with their kids about whether they are ready to enter this world, and makes sure that we are putting kids and parents in charge of which content they are selecting, which channels they're selecting, instead of putting some programmer who has been told to optimize profits in charge of that content. So I think that's a really important point to make, because I know, there are going to be a lot of people who make money off of this industry pushing back on this proposal, but it's such a simple proposal in large part because we don't think it's right for Congress to step in and dictate the specific kind of content. We think that's a conversation that should happen between a parent and a child inside a family, and this bill allows for that conversation to happen in a way that it just is not today. Because unless I'm sitting there looking over my kid's shoulder at all times, I can't know.
And we've tried.
Exactly right. I've tried. I can't know exactly what TikTok is delivering or YouTube is delivering. So all we're talking about is giving that power back to the families.
And if I could just say about the comparison that Senator Smith made between Tipper Gore's concerns about music or music videos back in the 1990s, for that matter, that Liz Cheney has expressed in her public life as well, it's just an inapt comparison for the reason Senator Murphy stated. Those are content-based restrictions. Sometimes in the law we have content-based restrictions for things like obscenity and fraud. Our bill has no content restrictions. Our bill simply says that parents deserve the same rights in the digital world that they have in the real world, and that they should have a say in their kids' usage of social media, and that social media shouldn't be specifically targeting these kids with algorithms that we know are harmful to them. So I know that a lot of senators haven't had time to read this bill. As Senator Britt said, it's relatively simple and straightforward. I'm sure that once they read the bill, they'll understand that this bill simply allows parents the same rights in the digital world that they have in the real world.
Is there any concern that this could open the door for tech companies to collect more private data on users? And
Tom just whispered, "Oh, I want this one."
So this is related to the age verification question, which is a red herring. No, not at all. In fact, it'll prevent tech companies from collecting information on children under the age of 13, which they currently do through their extremely weak and easily avoided age verification attestation. So that's the first case. It'll actually reduce the amount of information they have about America's kids, because children under the age of 13 actually won't be able to get on social media. Second, the idea that this is going to allow anyone, government or tech companies, to collect more information they currently do is completely false. Remember, we're only talking about two pieces of data here. The first is your birth date, which many people post on social media anyway. And the second, for children 13 to 17, is your parent-child relationship. That is already held by numerous government agencies at the federal, the state, and the local level. The DMV, the Social Security Administration. And I got to tell you, if you're worried about anyone having your birth date, let me caution you what social media already has about you. I've seen several of you during this press conference tapping away at your phones. I bet you might have been putting out posts on Twitter or other social media accounts. You know that they're following what you're writing. They can predict in the future what you might write based on what you've been tapping. If you click on one account, they can predict and therefore send you to other accounts that are like that. If you click on a video to watch it, they'll know how long you watch that video and what it says about your user habits. These are the kinds of practices that we want to stop for America's youth. So that, again, just like the challenge of online age verification, the claims that this is somehow going to create some new centralized database or national ID, it is completely false. And frankly, if you're arguing for that and you're not misinformed, you're just shilling for the social media companies.
So what does enforcement and accountability actually look like?
The FTC has authority to enforce here, so do state AGs. That's the enforcement regime that is generally the strongest for tech policy. Just one final comment, two final comments. We're available for additional conversations as we go through this bill. I think it is significant that we have such a wide ideological spectrum represented at this on this podium. I can't imagine, I'm sure there are, because I'm looking forward to it, but I can't off the top of my head come up with that many other bills that we would all announce together. And I think that that shows the power of this issue and this moment. And one final thought is the tech industry is going to come at this bill and every other kids online safety bill with everything it's got. And they are going to come up with individual use cases and scenarios to try to poke holes in this. But the burden of proof is on those who want to protect the status quo, because the status quo is making a whole generation of users mentally ill. Thank you.
Hey, Tina Smith is still open to it. I don't want to get her in trouble. She just had a first blush.
Did anybody else get crackling when they put their hands on the podium? You're in it too?